When people think about integrity in their local governments, they most often think about failures of integrity, particularly corruption in its many forms: nepotism, bribery, misuse of power, or the misuse of public property and resources. So, it's not surprising that when we start to discuss strengthening integrity in local government, we focus in most cases exclusively on how to address corruption. We turn to the many well-established measures commonly in use to assist us in our efforts to limit the damage from these many failures of integrity. These measures include rules and procedures to ensure that people in positions of trust, in other words, elected or appointed public servants, do not abuse this trust, and that the organizations which they lead or manage also become and remain trustworthy and effective institutions. We want to be sure that these people and their institutions will abide by the rules, and that they will allow for the bright light of public scrutiny to have complete access to evaluate the propriety of their official actions. There are two unstated assumptions in all of this. First, it's assumed that, unless prevented from doing so, people will be tempted to be corrupt. Second, we assume that corrupt people who are placed in leadership or management positions with institutions will shape the ethical culture, the ethos of such institutions, which in turn will succumb to corruption. To be as sure as we can that such people will behave properly, both as trusted individuals and as people who shape institutional values, we implement a number of integrity-building procedures. These particular procedures constitute the compliance tools of integrity, some examples of which are better oversight of local government staff, limiting each local official's level of discretion so that he or she has less to bargain with, avoiding situations where an official has a monopoly control over any aspect of development, and ensuring that all senior officials regularly declare all of their assets. At the national government level, a whole institutional compliance orientation, some would even say an industry, has sprung up in response to this constraints-based approach to integrity. Many lawyers, police, criminologists, auditors, accountants, social scientists keep very busy crafting and enforcing new and more effective codes of conduct, imposing ever stricter sanctions and gaining new legislative tools to protect whistleblowers and to force transparency and light into the murkier regions of government. At the local government level, however, there are insufficient resources and staff to field such a comprehensive anti-corruption army. But many local governments find themselves subjected to increased scrutiny by local civil society and national government officials. Strangely, despite all this effort and expenditure, corruption isn't going away. Okay, it never will disappear entirely, but the compliance-based tools do go some significant distance in constraining corruption. We can do more, however. Doing more means beginning to talk about the other side of the integrity in government coin, the positive view of integrity. Come to think of it, the absence of this dialogue is strange. Common sense and our own personal experience tells us that there are good people in local governments who exert a quiet but steady positive influence on their own local government institutions. We've all run into such people time and time again, although they often call little attention to themselves. Shouldn't we be balancing the fight against those who challenge government integrity by identifying and strengthening those who resolutely stand up for such integrity? Should we really not be doing much more than we are doing now to identify, encourage, even celebrate people and institutions of integrity, and public services marked by integrity? These people and institutions are the integrity resources that are known by their desire to pursue and achieve high integrity standards, and the integrity tools related to this positive reinforcement of integrity we call the aspirational approach. The aspirational approach does not take the place of the compliance approach. The goal is for the two to work hand in hand. Despite the intuitive sense that this hand-in-hand aspirational and compliance joint approach certainly should be happening, in reality, the pro-integrity aspirational agenda gets only a fraction of the popular attention that the anti-corruption orientation does. As a consequence, in the public mind, the word ethics, in the context of governance, remains clothed only in its compliance attire. No-nonsense rules and sharp penalties, disciplinary committees, and a social protection against people behaving in shameful ways. Now, we've defined ethics already as the framework that guides our decision-making by bringing together in one interrelated system our most important moral values. But what then is integrity? We frequently described integrity in terms of its core meaning, wholeness, and stress the importance of this ideal. The word itself has its roots in the word integer, which means one. The sense of oneness or wholeness is the heart of integrity, and a good place to begin thinking of integrity as a local governance concept. Yet certainly integrity is a lot more than just a concept or an ideal. In governance terms, integrity is a practical, even fundamental way of operating, applicable to any organization, including local governments. Conceptually, we might agree at this point that integrity seems like a worthwhile attribute of good local governance. We may feel a strong sense that integrity is fundamental to the success of local governance. Yet even such institutions and strong feelings may not be enough. What really motivates our local government and our local leaders in the public, civil society, and private sectors to move from being persuaded about integrity to actually doing something about it? Well, we're left with two approaches to motivating integrity, each of which offers different paths from concept to action, and both of which are needed. First, there is the compliance-based approach I just mentioned. For those contemplating actions that would threaten local government integrity, bribes to local officials for instance, this approach offers motivations not to act in this way. These disincentives typically include making the risk very high of being caught in such illicit and immoral action, coupled with serious penalties once caught and convicted. The fear of being caught, disgraced, and punished may be sufficient motivation to dissuade many persons or their institutions from eroding or destroying local government integrity. But there will always be some persons who view each threat of this kind as a challenge, a game even, to pursue corruption or similar integrity-eroding actions and not get caught. In short, they may be motivated to rise to the challenge of outsmarting the latest compliance regime, and they may drag their institutions into that moral morass as well. This phenomenon, at the personal level, was demonstrated dramatically when the World Bank began to experience a steady decline in the integrity of its professional consultants. They reacted by making the compliance regulations even more strict. But the corruption continued. In fact, it even got worse. In a 2-year investigation that I was involved with, my team discovered something quite remarkable. The tighter the compliance-based regulations became, the less motivated became the professionals of integrity to work for the World Bank as a consultant. As one prominent and highly respected engineer told me, "Why should I work for them? They begin our working relationship assuming that I am a crook. I've got better ways to spend my time." So, pushing the compliance-based approach this hard had the effect of discouraging or demotivating, if you will, the good guys. The ones who were left were the ones who took this as a challenge. How to outfox the compliance rules and still get away with illicit or immoral behavior. In short, the only ones remaining in the game were the crooks. While this World Bank example is focused on motivating integrity with individual consultants hired by a prominent institution, the same combination of compliance-based and aspirational measures can help to shape the integrity of institutions, provided that the institution's leaders and managers place high priority in the pursuit of integrity and such related moral values as professionalism, public service, courtesy, honesty, diligence, openness, and trustworthiness. Within institutions, integrity doesn't just happen. It must be actively pursued and intentionally nourished. Integrity, actively pursued, means focusing on motivations, getting the good guys acting both as individuals as well as the good guys acting together as an institution with a common identity, to take a personal and institutional interest in achieving, sustaining, and building ever stronger integrity in local government. This is usually best achieved by a range of incentives: establishing a strong, positive expectation that integrity will be sought by all elected and appointed members of the local government, identifying persons or departments where integrity is the norm, celebrating or calling attention to integrity wherever it is found, and making those people or departments feel valued and respected, rewarding integrity with public recognition, such as awards or certificates or other special measures, even special holidays or bonuses, making a measurement and assessment of demonstrated integrity a part of each local government official's annual performance review, making integrity a key indicator that is measured internally by the local government in regular internal surveys, as well as externally by civil society monitors when they solicit the opinions of the public about the integrity of their local government, and having local government leaders and managers actively model high standards of integrity. These values, when combined with a pragmatic, compliance-based approach, can go some considerable distance in transforming the way that local government as an institution operates so that integrity becomes the norm. In these ways, integrity can become one of the most prominent attributes of the process of local government and one of the distinctive characteristics of local government leaders. Assuming that the most challenging problem, that of motivation to achieve and sustain integrity, can be addressed in this way, some obvious questions follow. First, how do we do it? How do we achieve this thing called integrity? Second, how do we know when it is achieved? Third, how do we sustain it over time? Let's take these one by one. Okay, first, how do we achieve this thing called integrity? Well, once we have an orientation towards integrity as a sought-for virtue of several public servants, as well as a valued institutional attribute of local governance, and have therefore solved the most vexing problem of motivation, the path to integrity depends on setting some goals and standards. At the level of individuals, leading a life of integrity naturally has many dimensions, and it is not our purpose here to explore the integrity of one's personal life. Public officials, however, operate on the basis of a public trust. So the citizens whose taxes pay for these officials, or whose votes put the elected officials into office in the first instance, have a real stake in making sure that integrity becomes the chief characteristic of these officials' thinking and action. For this reason, one of the most important components of a pro-integrity approach is a well-conceived and actively implemented code of ethics. A code of ethics has two purposes. First, it sets some minimal thresholds, some bottom-line standards that must not be transgressed. These are effectively rules of conduct. Old-fashioned codes contain nothing else, and were simply called codes of conduct. Many of them consist of a list of prohibitions, advising the public servant of the many things he or she shall not do. A newer code, a code of ethics, adds a much richer dimension to this list of prohibitions by focusing on the ethical quality of the public servant's critical thinking and moral awareness. It provides key moral principles derived from appropriate moral values, and each of these principles is described in such a way as to offer genuine guidance to the official concerned. For example, if the local government personnel identify the moral value of service and customer care as being a core value of their work, then an appropriate ethical principle that can be derived from such a value might be stated as follows. The primary goal of the local government and its personnel is to provide the mandated basic infrastructure services to people in need with courtesy, diligence, care, respect,